Oh man.
My goodness.
Anyways, I could switch back. So basically, it just shows it as a separate camera. So you just choose it.
Yeah, it's just another.
Yeah, as a separate camera, and then in the app, you pick which camera it's actually using to show your face.
Welcome to the future, everybody.
Oh, now we're gonna have 2 episodes with the same name.
Yeah, but okay, you can do the whole I don't know if I'll be able to do it if you do the whole podcast.
We should
Oh,
we should each play each other in the podcast with that thing.
See if anybody
That would
notices. Let's talk about Figma variants. I think they're super nice.
I love them.
They work so well. I've been slowly converting the library at work to use them, and it other than messing up everybody's existing files that were using the old symbols, it's great.
So how does it work? Is it all as far as Figma? Because I haven't used Figma. Are all your files saved on through their system, or do you save it locally?
Yeah, so Figma's just all cloud-based, which to me is it has great features too, but that's just so cool for me because I don't even have to have it installed. I can bring it up in any browser if I think about it. If I need to go make a change on something, I just go hop in Firefox or Chrome on any computer and I can get to it. It's really cool.
Nice. That's cool.
The use case that the web-based nature of it becomes the most valuable in my perspective is sharing with stakeholders or sharing with other people.
Yeah.
Because now, and also because of how their pricing structure works, where basically you're only paying for editors. So now I could literally share my design file with all of our product managers and all of our engineers, and they can see everything without me having to do any kind of exporting or anything like that. They can see it all, and they can see it in real time, and they can follow along if they want to. That to me, and they don't have to install anything.
Well,
I'm thinking about Sketch or Adobe XD. Even if they have a free license somehow or the ability to view for free, they'd have to install it, or I'd have to upload it or sync it to some cloud service. It's just really cool to be able to have it all right there, and then super easy to share without any extra work for stakeholders.
Yeah, there's no publishing to InVision or Sketch Cloud or whatever. It's there. And we've had some things where some people really want kind of a publishing feature when they're working with I guess higher level stakeholders, which I understand, but there's kind of ways around that. But
so how is it since I don't use this system as much, I usually use all Adobe products, and that's what I've used pretty much my whole career. I know y'all use some of that once in a while, but you use Sketch and Figma, and there was another one you mentioned, I think. How does that work as far as transitioning back and forth? Do your teams usually set up a certain one you're going to use, or does each designer use a different one, or how do y'all do it?
You kind of have to be on board. Everybody really has to, changing is actually a big deal. In fact,
I would figure that, but
and John just went through it, and it's you have to have everybody on board. Yeah. Because it's not the same as delivering assets like you would with a Photoshop or Illustrator. It's it's an ecosystem that if you're not all doing it, it just doesn't. It doesn't work as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know if the way y'all talked about trying out different ones that you were.
Well, we do that.
Doing
still.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't know if that was a full workplace thing that y'all all try different things and.
I'm sure there are some companies where the team or the teams are, or the company's large enough where different teams use different tools within the same company. But I think generally, if you're going to be sharing any kind of assets or components, any kind of shared library styles or anything like that, you're going to want to be in the same tool. Otherwise, it's going to just be really difficult. From a company perspective, obviously having to pay for more than one tool isn't necessarily ideal, and just the additional effort it takes to try and figure out, okay, so where was that file? Was it in that tool or this tool or whatever?
I 100% agree. I feel the same way. I just didn't know if it was somehow different for y'all than it is for me.
Yeah,
because we couldn't do that. It would not work out very well.
This feels like beating a dead horse, but it's not dead in my mind. This thing is—it's an alive horse. It's an alive.
This is an
Big
ongoing
Sur
story
horse
on our podcast.
that and John, I think, is gonna give us some counterpoint at some point here. But these are these in particular are like, they're just I don't know. They're just really bad.
They're bad.
They're just really bad.
Yeah, and anyone listening, he's showing the icons from the new Apple update.
Big Sur.
But just the
just the four of them.
Pages, no, I don't even remember what they're all called.
Numbers.
iWork. It's iWork stuff and iMovie.
Yeah.
And
they're really bad. They're terrible. They look like something from like the early 2000s in Microsoft Word, like clip art that you would get. Yes. Honestly, they look terrible. I know someone designed these, and I would be upset at the person that approved these to go out.
The headcanon for me on this is, the way that I'm thinking about it is, these were a designer trying to be ironic because they were told something they didn't like. And so they just they were like, we're doing it. We're going all out. And this is ironic design. That's how I'm reading this. I'm doing it.
That's your defense mechanism,
question,
I think.
it makes me question either their hiring process, who.
But don't you like the backgrounds? The backgrounds fit exactly with what they do. One is there's grid lines,
two are grid lines, right? And then one is
one's a grid. One is,
it's hard to see
one is the lines of a paper for pages, and the other one is squares because presentations.
It's great because you can always tell what those patterns are from the size of the icon. It's really easy. The one that
triggered me first. The rest of these I found later, but I found the new iMovie one because it was asking me for an update, and I was like, the old icon was bad, and they just put the old icon inside of a white square.
And put a drop shadow behind it. It's so bad. And there are some okay ones.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Well,
that are updated.
And John,
hold on, before we move on, hold on.
Yes, I want to hear what you have to say and your defense, or if you're going to defend these. I would like to hear what that is.
I will agree that in general, the icons in this Big Sur release aren't great, just as a general statement. So we're on the same page, and I'm not going to necessarily defend this because I agree that also the language is just all over the place. We talked about this last time, but there are some sets of icons that seem to match each other, and then some, but then they don't match the entire family. It doesn't make a lot of sense. There are some that I think look really good and are improvements over the old icon, and there are some that are clearly much, much worse. I do think actually the iWork icons that you were showing were not the worst of the worst. I think you could have picked worse icons to represent the worst. We don't even have the QuickTime icon here, which I think is one of the worst of all. I don't mind the iWork ones as much as it sounds like you guys do. I really don't like the numbers because the bars don't make sense to me.
They're just bad.
The pages one looks actually okay to me, and the keynote is my second least, or it's ranked 2 out of the 3 to me. I also don't think iMovie is very good, but again, it would have been fine probably without the drop shadow, I think, and some of the additional elements. But here's the thing, I think a lot of what people are reacting to is how different they are. I'm trying to like come at it from it with an open mind and not let my aversion to change affect that. I agree that a lot of them are bad, and there are parts of them that I wouldn't have done, like I personally would not have done or approved. But I also think that they're not as bad as, at least a lot of them aren't as bad as we are making it out to be.
So I just Googled real quick while you're talking. This is just a great example. I Googled QuickTime icon for Big Sur. The top result was Cult of Mac. So obviously it's all about Mac, people who love Mac stuff. The article is called Fantastic to Fugly. All the new app icons in macOS Big Sur. I think that explains a lot right there.
I completely agree.
And I would say a lot of the old ones weren't great either, but the new style is just not consistent and not good.
John, the Eckert, brought these up as ones that he really likes, so I wanted to give him a chance to talk about
So what I like about these is, I mean, all of the icons are throwbacks to the previous versions. These two are not exceptions. I think they're just like the previous versions. I think they both worked well in this new like Squircle style, this like square shape that all of the icons are fitting into now. I don't know. These were two examples of icons that I thought were done well, that worked well. Again, they don't necessarily match well with other icons in the group, and that's one of the issues that I have with the icons in Big Sur in general. But these are examples of some of the icons that I think are really well done versions of the Big Sur icon family. And you might not like the family in general, and that's fine, but I think of the family, given the design language they're using, these are some of the better versions of those, especially compared to some of the worse ones.
Like these, they both feel a little more purposeful, like you said. It's the ones that they just put the drop shadow on and are super bubbly. It's the inconsistency. I said it before. It's really just the inconsistency of the whole system.
Yeah.
That blows my mind.
And it's also...
It just makes me question who makes the call, the final decision of what's going out.
I also think just real quick, if you think about, and this is not necessarily an excuse, but it is trying to empathize with like what it's like and being in a big company where, directives are handed down from on high, even maybe, when you're at a company like Apple where you have like executive leadership on the design side. My company doesn't have like design leadership in that sense, but it does, but like Apple definitely does. It's likely that these kinds of things are handed down, and then but at the same time, designers are required to like keep the same feel of the old icon, fit within this certain like tight design language. And so like I can empathize with some of how, and at the same time fit a very tight schedule, right? Because Apple is is famous for releasing every single year at pretty much the same time frame. I mean, the amount of work that has to go into these operating systems and the apps in the operating system ridiculous. Every single year is unbelievable. And so like at a certain point, no matter how much money or resources you have, like there's going to be human limitations. And so, and if you're being given constraints from on high, like there's only so much you can probably do. Now, again, I'm not trying to say like, oh, don't blame them. These are fine. Like, I don't think they are. I'm just saying like trying to think of it from that perspective. I do tend to be willing to give them a little more leeway because of that.
My response, though, to some of that is that Apple has always been like a leader in design, in their product design, but also they've always seemed to have such a high level of value in design. And like there's a business value of design report, a McKinsey report, and I can't get to it right now, but I'm pretty sure Apple is one of the top companies that invest the most in design in general. Yeah. So that's where I'm like, yes, I agree that some, bigger companies, there's a lot of, hassle, but when you're a company like Apple, in general, everyone expects a bit more, and you should expect
I agree.
more out of what you're producing.
Which is why the backlash, I think, is so strong. Because there's plenty of other companies out there that have done pretty bad, icon family designs and stuff.
Yeah.
And the backlash is not as big because we expect Apple to be like, and we're all kind of Apple fanboys anyway, so we want everything to be good. So.
Yeah. It's always been a designer computer. Usually that's what designers typically use.
Yeah, because using a Windows PC is everything feels
awful.
Really weird and not very polished. I mean, it's better than it used
true.
to be, but
yeah. Real quick, Tori, if you want to click that link I sent to you, open it just for
Discord.
Yeah. It might be interesting to show a couple of them back and forth for anyone who's watching this, and we'll post this in the slide notes in the show notes.
I guess I just copied the title.
Oh yeah, you gotta. I had to do the same thing.
I just told it I did it.
Oh, I didn't see the.
Oh yeah.
But here, there's sliders where you can go back and forth, and it's kind of interesting to see the different icons as you can drag it back and forth. So I like the simplification of some of these, and then I don't like that one. A couple that one's not bad, but the those I don't like.
Icons that are downright gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I agree with some of what
I think it's
saying.
hilarious that the ones that they're calling out as gorgeous, these two are they're they're just utility apps. Like this is like one of these is like the color calibrator tool, and this one is like I forget what it's called. That's preview. That one's just bad. Photo import, which anyway, what were they thinking? It looks like the QuickTime logo to me. I'm good with it.
Well, so what's interesting here is as we've been looking at these screenshots of icons, I'll just point out, I'm looking at my applications folder, and a lot of the icons are different, like in significant ways. Like the QuickTime Player one has a black background with a silver Q. Like a light silver Q, and then that kind of like a light blue, similar to what you see here. It looks even worse than what we see here, but it's interesting. Like a lot of the icons I'm noticing have, relatively significant differences. So anyone who's watching or listening, you may want to, you can look at what we're showing here, but you may want to look at it yourself, like in more updated.
That's true.
I love this one. This one is.
They just added the background.
You just plopped in a background.
I mean, it's just a utility, so it's totally milk, eggs, bread.
That's
I like
better.
this one.
That's fun.
I like
that
this
one's
one.
actually
That
better.
one
I don't know why
works.
it's under the. It's simplified.
That's funny.
Anyways.
While you're walking through this, I also want to mention too, like Apple has a history of, recent history of making like drastic changes that are very, very controversial. So if you remember,
they like
iOS 7. iOS 7 was the transition from skeuomorphism to like super flat.
Yep.
And if you look at that history, there's a tendency to go like way too far. Now, whether that's intentional or not, I'm not sure. But then you also can see that how they, over time, they step it more toward the center, and it gets better. Like it gets significantly better over time. So I imagine that this is what's going to happen with Big Sur, and that they decided on a new language. They said, let's go all in, and now we're going to see over time improvements and tweaks.
Where they could have just stayed with, kept their current language and just adjusted some of the icons that weren't very skeuomorphic.
Yeah, they could have, but that's just not that's not a thing that they do.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying like they've shown that they do that in the past.
Well, I like this next thing we're going to talk about too. If we're going to talk about the visual phenomenon.
Yeah, so I was working on a personal project and I ran into this, and I actually ran into it at work the other day too, like almost at the same time I was doing this. And it's small on the screen. For those of you listening, I am It's just a text box that's enter your email, and then there's a button next to it, and it's a blue button, and the text box is a typical white with a slight gray border, and the blue button has no border. But the visual phenomena that happens is because they're pretty close together, left and right, the text box appears like pretty substantially shorter than the button. I mean, it's, you know, at least a couple pixels shorter, which is visibly shorter. Even though they're the same height, they're both 32 pixels high or 34 or whatever these are. I found it very interesting because I think I've run into this before, but for some reason it occurred to me again as if it was new. I was like, man, how am I going to fix this? And I'll show you, I'll show some of the things that I tried just to see, like, to experiment what would help with that. But yeah. I wanted to talk about, like, maybe what causes this, since I know, Pope, you know a lot about this kind of stuff, and Ecker does too. But I thought it was an interesting thing that I ran into.
It is. I've run into some of that too before. And I think some of it with this particularly, obviously there's the difference in color and, like, weight of the color on the screen. So you have the white, and that's obvious white, that's the text box that you type in. And then next to it's that heavier color. And so that's going to, in general, you know, draw your eye to it and make it feel like it's just larger. But also it's the rounded corners that I've found that sometimes if they're next to each other and if they're different color blocks, they can look larger because you're not seeing that exact point right next to each other. That's another part of it.
There's a dip. Yeah.
Yeah, like I would put more space in between. If they are going to have rounded corners, I would definitely give it a little more space. I wonder if it has to do with, and maybe you'll show what you've tried, Tori, but like if either this was not on a light blue background, which tends to merge visually with the light gray border. So I wonder if it were on a white background or a darker background, if this would no longer be an issue, or if the white text field didn't have a border but was just like pure white, if that would also solve it. Because I'm imagining that it's mostly just the closeness in contrast of the light gray border and the background that's causing it. And with, like what John's saying, the rounded corners and the closeness that kind of are all playing together to give us this phenomena that we're talking about.
The light gray border, I think, does make it in general feel slightly smaller. And in fact, it probably is just a little bit. The white area is probably slightly smaller than the other side.
Right.
Just if you just take
it's
the
an
white
inside
part.
border. So yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's probably, like you said, John, that's probably some of it. And yeah, it's also that visual weight on there because the blue is such a heavy color on that screen.
Well, and so I just did a couple of things, and I knew these weren't going to fix it, but I was trying to nail down in my head what was causing it, and I put a slightly darker blue border on the early access button because I thought maybe if the space inside the button was the same, it would feel like it, but it doesn't. It still feels taller, even with a border around the button. And then I put a dark border around the email just to see what that would do. Not that I wanted this, because this is more of like a focus state or something, but
yeah,
it actually all starts to become bigger than the button, just with a
little bit.
I
think it fixes it. Like
it does fix it though.
It fixes it more, but in my eye, still feels like now it feels like it's actually like, because it's actually even heavier than the blue, that it gets a little bigger. But it does. I think it comes a lot closer to fixing it. The thing that I think I'll end up probably doing is putting a little more space between them did help. And dropping the border entirely did help, but that doesn't. That only works, like, you can't do that in a UI. This happened to be on a landing page, so you can get away with that sometimes. But in an actual application UI, I've got to have the borders because it's got to be used in all sorts of places. So, and the dark mode version of it was interesting because it's the same thing. There's a different color border, but it works perfectly fine. There's no issue with it.
This one looks like it has more space too.
Yeah, it's spaced out just a tad. Yep.
And I also think because... Sorry, go ahead. No, I was going to say, and because, the rounded corners are slightly less rounded.
And it's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, the background of the text box matches closer to the background. Yep. And I think that gives it more visual weight to kind of counterbalance it.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting, like little tiny it shows you how important the little tiny things are in getting that polished interface. Now, will a user ever necessarily notice all of this? Not necessarily, but I have noticed things in applications where just because things visually don't quite line up, I start having more trouble knowing, especially if it's a more cluttered interface. So it is important to make things line up how they're supposed to, because that's how your eye follows.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because this, as a designer, this is one of those things that I'm sure any designer who's worked with engineers in the past has run into, where the engineer builds something and it looks off center, or it looks like it's not aligned properly, and what you end up realizing is that it's something like this, where the engineer did exactly what they were supposed to. They're the same exact height. They'll show you in the inspector, it's the same height, see? And what you're missing is designing with that visual aspect in mind, just visual centering. Oftentimes I have to ask an engineer to tweak the placement of an item, not because it's not centered, because it is technically from a mathematics standpoint centered, but whether it's because of the icon shape or whatever it is, it doesn't feel centered visually. And so that's a common issue. And it also
are horrible.
It's tough. And I also appreciate, I'll say, I work with a lot of engineers who have good visual abilities. And so a lot of this stuff does get done without me having to do that. And I have highly appreciate that. That means so much to a designer, to have an engineer that does that.
Oh yeah. When they come back to you with a design that you're like,
wow,
that looks like my design.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See, that still blows my mind, since I don't work as much with the developers. That would make me so upset if it didn't come back the way it was supposed to look. And I get the reasons why, the timing and the sprints, and what's important to them may not be important, or what's important to you isn't always as important to them. But that would just make me. Well, I think that would bother me a lot.
With enterprise design, you have to pick and choose a lot, because, for instance, there's a lot of cases where I barely even critique the visuals, because mostly we're relying on existing patterns, and as long as they're close, I'm fine. They're bothersome to me, and if I can get them to do it, I will. But what I really care about is, are we fulfilling the product requirements for this? Because sometimes that doesn't even happen. It comes back as we're not meeting the product requirements here. And also if I show it to users, are they does this work for them? And that's what's really tough about it, because it's hopefully it's not hard to make it look like your design, but it's something extra that in an enterprise environment, at least, it's the fact that you're getting this feature done at all sometimes is a miracle. And that's where you're okay, well, if I have a chance, I'm going to put in tickets to get this polished. But Yeah, it is frustrating. You hit the nail on the head, that it can be very frustrating if that's something you care about, which I do. So,
and it's I have to remind myself too, we're in different careers, and there's a reason for that. And we have different focus areas, and an engineer is doing a lot more than just the visuals. And so I try to just keep that in mind, because in most cases it's not going to be exactly like your design. And so you just have to realize, all right, that that's what it's going to be, and we will work together to get it to the point where it's as close to the design as possible, within the constraints of time and things like that. But it's just something you work through.
Yeah.
And they probably think the same about us when we're like giving them designs and they're like, "You want me to code this?"
Oh yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yep. Well, and anytime that you give them anything that's extra, that's not just putting the stuff on the page and using existing controls, you are going absolutely, and with good reason, you're going to get side eyes. And every time, I will try, if I think it's a pattern that really tested well with users or something like that, I will push it and I will get people on my side to do it. But most of the time, the fact of the matter is I just think it's cool or better. I don't necessarily have like, it's just me being a silly designer. And I think products need silly designer stuff, but you got to pick your battles on which silly designer stuff you get.
Oh, for sure.
And if you have user testing to back up one of those, then yeah, for sure.
Oh, and I deal with that with
stuff
too. Yeah, for sure. I was kind of while you all were talking, I was thinking about print design, and whenever I've worked with printers and thinking it's so different as far as, so like we did a magazine and I was the art director for the magazine. So you go there and if like one thing's not right, you're like, no, you have to go back and change what you have, adjust the colors on the machine and do everything when you're doing a press check. And when it's so different in this, it's obviously totally different environments and different, people that are doing the actual execution of it. But it's just interesting to think about.
It feels like it should be equivalent because it's like, there was a thought through this part of the process, so we should follow it. Like a printer doesn't come back to you unless there's some technical reason why they can't print it that way. They don't come back and say, "Yeah, we're not going to print the titles the right size."
Yeah, exactly. I feel like, well, I'm not going to pay for this job, and I will use someone else.
So, John, do you want to introduce the next one?
Some hamburgers. No, so
I smell some sizzling.
That was my very bad attempt at a transition joke.
In and out.
Yeah, so I put this in the show notes. I thought it would be fun to talk about the infamous hamburger menu, which is a much maligned tool in the UI or UX designers tool belt. And I have always felt for a long time that I was in the minority as someone who frankly didn't think it was as bad as most, at least from what I've like anecdotally heard, most designers think. So it seems like the general consensus, the majority of people say don't use a hamburger button, it's bad. And they'll pull up things like the Nielsen Norman Group article that is there on the right, to the right, that is a study, real research that says that hidden navigation, like in hamburger menus, hurt discoverability, which I don't disagree with, but I also think there are reasons why and ways to use a menu like a hamburger menu that are completely valid. And the fact that it's extremely recognizable these days, like maybe at one point it wasn't, but everyone knows what a hamburger menu is when they see it. Yeah. And so I think that has to be taken into account as well. So anyway, I just thought it would be fun to have a discussion about hamburger menus. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about whether they should be used and in what ways, whether you've seen good examples of usage or bad examples of usage. I thought it'd be an interesting topic to discuss.
I think that...
Go ahead, John.
Oh, sorry, you were talking, but I was going to just say, just quick thing, that I even think it'd be interesting someday to see a study or show this as a great example of how you can take something that isn't recognizable and controversial like this. It's almost like a logo design where if you come up with something totally new that's not recognizable for that brand, but if you're consistent with it and use it over time, it's something that people will recognize and know what it means. because I haven't read all of the Nielsen Norman Group report, but I mean,
who does?
I think most people, I've read some stuff, and
that's just a slight bash to Nielsen Norman. Just kidding.
But most people understand what the hamburger icon is nowadays.
Well, that's, I guess, I'll just clarify for those of you listening, if you perchance don't know what a hamburger menu is from that term, it's just where you see the 3 bars that when
just
you
go to our website on a mobile device.
Yeah, exactly.
3 horizontal bars.
Yeah, 3 bars that end up opening some sort of menu on a website or a web application.
Generally, it's on a mobile device. Yeah.
Often. And that's where it came about in the modern times, though. One of these articles that we'll share in the show notes talked about it originally was actually a lot of places in one of the early Xerox GUIs. And you see it, it's actually hilarious because it's in 3 places. Very unclear what in the world each of those do. So don't do this. I think that's
It seems like they're trying to say that there is a menu behind each of these locations.
I guess that's valid, but if you don't know what the menu is, then a hamburger is very bad. The reason why I think hamburgers are successful on mobile websites when in certain cases is because it's hey, I'm looking at a website and I need to see other pages that I don't see links on the page. It's always right there. I just tap it. It's a very convenient thing, and it's definitely become a colloquial. It's just like the save icon. A floppy disk doesn't actually mean save, and it's probably a little confusing if it doesn't have a, if you're what the world? But it's accepted, right? And I think this is a similar thing. This article, this Nielsen Norman article is very interesting, though, because there are cases where if you have a choice to do some other type of navigation, like a limited, tabs or something, absolutely people will be able to discover it easier, just inherently. So, it's weighing, if you have to do a hamburger menu, you do, but most of the time it is better to discover other things, I think.
Just quickly to give some highlights in what the cons are and what the major points against using this are, is that in general hamburger menus don't showcase the features. So if you're and this is maybe less from an enterprise application standpoint and more maybe a website where or a marketing site, I should say, a landing page or some sort of thing, something like that. Hiding everything under a menu doesn't show what's available in the site. It doesn't show where you can go, what you can do, what the features are, that sort of thing. Putting things in a drawer tends to infer that those items are less important. They're not important enough to put on the kind of right in front of the user. Generally just, and this is what I think the Nielsen Norman Group article is getting at, is generally click rates and discoverability are lower. So you can't really argue with the data. And also these kind of nav buttons that are at the top of mobile devices, especially in today's world where these devices are getting larger and larger, are just really hard to reach. You literally can't reach them with one hand. And so these are some real legitimate reasons not to use the buttons. My argument, I think, is that because it's so recognizable and because especially on mobile devices or mobile responsive websites, there is a limited amount of space. I think some of these other cons are, again, legitimate, but they don't necessarily outweigh the benefits of having a similar menu like a hamburger button or like the 3 dots. There are hybrid ways to do it as well. One example is if you look at Instagram, they have navigation across the bottom. Those you could argue are their primary navigation. And then they have other types of navigation that are one is under a hamburger menu. We shouldn't be talking about Instagram as a good example of navigation because I think it's extremely bad and it's super confusing. But they're an example of they have this hybrid version where they have primary nav that's right there in the open, and then they have other secondary nav that's hidden in a hamburger menu.
Yeah. Okay, Dribbble Roulette. How about some Dribbble Roulette? Anybody up for that?
Dribble me, Tori.
Bow.
We still don't have a theme song.
I know we need.
It's new every week.
Man.
That's what it is.
This is pretty cool looking. The buildings remind me of Fortnite.
I can't. Okay, sorry.
Really?
I gotta, Google Meet is the worst. It's so small on my
John,
screen.
Stop bashing. We're never gonna get that Google sponsorship if you keep saying that.
Dude, I don't care. Google Meet needs to get better.
Oh boy.
Let me rearrange where I want to put things. Yeah,
Why
that's
did
neat.
it move for you?
Super whimsical.
No,
Doesn't it remind you of
it was
Fortnite?
just really small.
Not at all.
Just
maybe
the
because-
non-rectangular shapes for the doors and stuff.
I mean, maybe, yeah, some, but I wouldn't have thought that at first because I've seen that's a very common, maybe not common style in some children's illustrations and certain book illustrations. I mean, to-dos.
Is that what this is?
I'm not sure.
I
don't think
life.
It could be, but I think it also could be a company or brand illustration. It would work as that.
I think it looks neat.
I
do too.
like it.
And I like
how
that
they
it
did-
works in black and white, like just black ink.
I'm
I
with you
think
there.
that's cool.
I love that. I feel like
I think
most
it's really-
designs should be able to do that in general from the start, and then you add color from there. That's how I like, at least for logos and stuff. But it's a good test to see.
I think that's a definite good way to do logos. I'm not sure about illustration. I think it's cool to be able to do it in monochromatically. I really like how the distance is being communicated by thinner and thinner lines or whatever, lighter lines. I think that's really neat, and you get the
and less detail. Yeah.
And less detail.
Cool.
You get the sense of it's kind of fading into the fog in the background, which is really neat.
Yeah.
I want to color it. That's what it makes me want to do. I
That's true.
color
That'd
it
be
in.
cool. So one thing, talking about black and white monochromatic, I would negate your point as far as it wouldn't work as well on illustrations or other things, because one of my old creative directors, my first creative director taught me, was we would print designs or other even website designs out on black and white paper as just a test to see how the visual weight was based on just a black and white.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I think you can use in illustration, you can use color as a tool. Whereas what you're talking about is well, anyway, I see what you're saying. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just, I think it's a definite rule. You should do that with logo design, but I don't think it has to be a necessity in illustration, just because illustration is so wide and you might want to use color as the tool for different, I don't know. Anyway.
No, I agree with you there. I agree. We both agree.
That's a good point though. That's an interesting point, printing out
Simmer
something
down,
in black
gentlemen.
and white just so that the colors aren't affecting how you view it.
Yeah, and I actually like that in product design sometimes too. If you, in fact, I mean, it's hard when you have an existing design system because you kind of just throw them in, but sometimes pulling it back is helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good illustration.
Oh, it's a Bitcoin app.
1 of 3 billion on Dribbble.
Oh man.
Tori, could you just send me the link real quick so I
Yeah.
can just also see it?
Oh, you can't. It's not working for you.
It's just not large enough for me to actually
It is hard
see
to
it well
see.
at small sizes.
Okay, I'll send you these then.
Thank you.
I zoomed in, but maybe I can zoom in a little further.
We still haven't talked about Dribble's redesign.
No, we should next week maybe.
By the time we do, it's going to be old news.
Maybe they'll fix some stuff.
Yeah.
I think they have already.
Yeah,
some
I think
stuff.
this one suffers from a little bit of lack of I'm not sure what those drop shadows behind each of the items are. Like they seem it. I don't know.
It's
it
too
seems
flat
like
and
a little
white.
bit not enough. Like it'd be better if they were just there, and didn't have that little weird drop shadow.
Yep.
The layout I don't mind.
Yeah, the layout's good, but I agree. It's sort of what we talked about with another UI we did on Dribbble Roulette, or I think it's just there's not enough differentiation in some of the elements.
I find it interesting that like those larger square shaped cards under price on the left screen. They have a stronger drop shadow, which I think works better. Maybe it's not enough still, but it's way stronger than the other more horizontal cards. And I think I don't know if it would look good because you have to be careful with like these kinds of lists or things that are close together in drop shadow, because then you get a weird like dippy gradient feel between the things. But I think if it's like a washed out enough shadow, then it's not an issue. But I think there could have been improvements with the shadow. I think this is, and I'm not necessarily defending it, but just from what I've seen, this is very in style. This kind of like white on white and using like very blurred drop shadows in order to differentiate. Like this is very much on fleek.
Yep.
Is that the right terminology?
Yeah. So what the kids are using these days.
Yeah, it's very much like in style. I think that doesn't make it right or good. I'm just saying like,
yeah,
there's a lot. Of this
I think it's well designed in general. Like the layout is nice and the spacing of things is nice.
Yeah, I don't find it hard to read at all. That was mostly just kind of a nitpick on the drop shadow.
Yeah, it's nice.
I'm not a fan of the selected state in the nav at the bottom.
I know that looks
it just feels weird. The bright red with the white,
and it's icon. A little not that much padding around it.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if it's as successful.
Here's a question for y'all.
Bad,
so on the chart on the right, just because I'm curious, the way it has the gradient get darker at the top. I know how they did that in the software, but is that something that could actually be coded out like that so that it gets darker as it goes up?
Yeah, I mean, depending on your charting library, I'm sure something can do that. I mean, it's not like trivial, but I mean,
but it's essentially just a gradient that is going
is
to the background color.
No, you just if you're drawing this on a canvas or something, which a lot of the charting libraries will draw on a canvas, you would just fill that path with a gradient once it's
cool.
So it's doable. Yeah. In fact, it might be even built into some of those charting libraries.
This might be an example of that like designery thing Tori was talking about, that the engineer would be like, come on, man.
I don't want to do that. It's not
like,
built
yes, I could
library.
do it, but do I have to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Numero 3.
Ooh, I like this.
I love
nice.
when there's a little grain texture over it. Do you need me to send this to you too?
No, this is.
I think I see it. I thought that was like artifacts from the web meeting that were on,
it has
but that's
like
actually in the shot.
That film grain.
It's a subtle
I love
film grain
on stuff.
I do too. I feel like it gives it just that bit of texture that helps it set aside from things. I do like it. That's good.
What is the
It's one of those easy things to throw on top of a graphic like this.
The coffee. Is this meant to look like a tarot card or something? I'm not sure if it's like referring to something or if it's just a card.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's probably
also
like that.
Is it the key to survival, the coffee, or what is the little I in the left corner? Or is that a 1?
I guess it's a 1. They should add a little.
It says this is a recent piece inspired by the key to survival. So maybe it's a card game that has this style.
It must be because of that random 1. I don't know why they would put that in there.
Yeah. It's cool though.
Yeah, I like it.
I think it's really
I like
cool.
how they had the hand go through and one of the rays goes over top. That's always a nice touch.
This is the thing I like about when we look at illustration stuff. It's very easy to be like, because it's like more on the art side of things than on the tech, like product design sometimes is. It's a little bit more like, yeah, maybe I would do some things different, but like this works as a design. And I think that's always cool.
Yeah.
I also like when designers on Dribbble do something like, instead of just plopping the design on like a background and then uploading that, which is something I tend to do.
Yeah.
They actually like add design elements around it, like on the background, that just like makes it a bigger piece. Now, maybe in this case, this is a bigger piece that we're just seeing a piece of, but like in a lot of cases, designers will go the extra effort to make the entire like shot, including the background, like designed, which I always appreciate, and I rarely do because I'm lazy sometimes. But
well, it's like
I just
post
forget to
once
actually
to
post
Dribbble
anything
every year. You know, so
right. Same here.
Every year I'm like, I'm going to post more this year, and then and I always forget.
I'm going to do that once a week thing.
Yeah.
Okay, we should probably move to recommendations. I just had one, and I'm not really going to talk about it that much. I just thought it was an interesting article, which we'll link to, about using design to help design cities and stuff. I thought it had a lot of interesting points in it. Cool.
Wow, so you really sold that. I'll have to read it now.
Well, if you're interested in the way design can play into how environments are structured, to in this case they talk a lot about like structural racism and things like that, but it can be applied in all sorts of ways, then this article is interesting, and it's a little bit more in depth than some other articles, so that's why I liked it.
Very cool.
That does sound interesting. I constantly find myself while I'm driving thinking, someone had to like design all of these roads and the way that they all work together. Like it's kind of mind blowing to think, like all that had to go into that, and especially in like a city or like, let's take Pittsburgh as an example, like all the bridges and the way they like weave in and out of each other. Like it's actually mind blowing to me that someone had to like do that. And it's not like just a product design where, what's the worst case scenario? Someone might click a button and get an error message or something like you're talking about people's lives and stuff. Like if you fail, or even worse, well, not worse than someone dying, but like, if you build a road and it's poorly designed, like that's like bad traffic for the rest of eternity, like until it gets fixed. Like that's a high risk situation. And so, I have a lot of respect for the people who design these sorts of things.
Well, and you don't really notice this kind of stuff unless it's done poorly. Like
that's the definition of good design. You don't know.
Yeah, well,
that's
like
true.
If the DMV was good, you wouldn't ever talk about. It's not like you'd rave about the DMV. It would just be the DMV. But we say bad things about it because most of the time it's pretty poorly designed experience for whatever reason. So yeah,
it's very true.
Cool. I have two quick ones. So I recently had got some use out of this, and generally I find this pretty interesting. And this is just an article that goes into some detail and has some helpful practical tips on building user-friendly data tables. I find like the design of dense data interesting because it's a challenge to try and make high volumes of data that is inherently pretty boring visually, easy to consume, and good looking. And so this article I thought was just useful and had some useful tips for how to design data tables and do it in a way that works well and looks good. So just a practical tip if you're ever designing a table, it's a nice resource. My second one is, I'll just mention, oh, sorry, did anyone have something to say about that?
Yup.
Before I move on?
Looks good.
Yep. Okay, good. Okay. My second one is a tool that I'm excited about that's not out yet. It's not available yet, but I have been following them on Twitter for a while. It is a task management tool. To me, looking at this this image here, which is a picture showing the inbox of the to-do list, the inbox to-do list, and then the sidebar, showing a glimpse of the UI. It feels very much like Things for Mac. If you're not familiar with Things, it's by a developer named Cultured Code. One of the best, in my opinion, task management apps. It's pretty simple, but it also has, it's flexible as well. But this looks like one of my major downsides with Things, in my opinion, is it doesn't feel like it's being worked on very much. Like they release a giant release every so often, and then just like little maintenance type updates in between. And I would look for something that's more actively developed and released. If this is anything like that, it looks very much like Things. It looks like it works similar to Things, but I'm hoping that it is developed more actively. One of the things that it really drew me to it, other than just the general design, is the attention to detail in the iconography and some of the animations that are used. For example, when you like check off a task or something like that, there's every little interaction has like a fancy little animation, to the point where it's like, these don't even need this. But as someone who enjoys this kind of stuff and enjoys tools like this, like that's a big selling point for me. Is it needed? No. But is it awesome and delightful? Yeah. So I'm really excited, and I'm following it closely. I think just today I clicked the little bell icon to get notified of tweets, so that when they have a beta, hopefully I can get on it. But yeah, look at these icons, like the animations when you click on them, instead of just going into a selected state, they have a nice transition animation, which is fancy.
That's nice.
And fun. Completely unnecessary, but looks awesome and definitely brings delight.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So
yeah,
check them out.
Cool. Why invest in Sonic's branding? I'm assuming this is talking about Sonic the Hedgehog and how every company should make their brands.
I assumed it was Sonic the fast food restaurant.
Oh yeah.
No, neither actually.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
microphone. Okay. Got it.
Oh. So this was an article I found, and I thought it was very interesting. It's titled "Audio Branding: Now's the Time for Brands to Invest in Their Sonic Identity." And something I haven't necessarily actually thought about as something for branding, but it talks about how companies like Netflix and some other companies have their own sounds that they use, and now we recognize them as part of the brand. So it's just an extension of the brand and another brand element that you can use in your arsenal of brand, equipment or whatever. But yeah, like everyone typically knows the Dun Dun from Netflix.
The mooing cows is my favorite brand.
Which one's that?
For THX.
Right. That actually gets me excited because it brings me back to the time when we could go to movie theaters.
Another good one is Brick.
Yes.
That's true.
I'm surprised you got that out of that, because that was really bad.
I'm also thinking of the HBO tag. I don't know what those things are called. Are they tags? I don't know what those are called. But the like snow sound. Wow, I'm not doing a good job of explaining this. Do you know what I'm talking about? The HBO logo, and it's in front of like the TV snow.
Oh yeah,
like
the white noise from the TV
the white noise,
in the
that's
background.
What I was looking for. Yes, thank you for saving me.
But it talks about how like other brands can use this type of element of sound, and it just started me thinking, and I sent it to some of my creative team just as it'd be interesting to think about like what frontline educations would be if that was something, not that we would ever need that, but you never know if there's some way to incorporate sound in some element of the product itself. I'm not, just it's an interesting article and not something that I've thought a lot about.
I also find that interesting too with the rise of podcasting and also like these assistants in tubes that are in everyone's houses, and a lot of companies from a UX standpoint, companies are building these assistant interfaces that are there are no visual interfaces and they're all audio based. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, even if you aren't just a content creator or a web or a video streaming service, to have these kinds of audible brand elements, like you were saying, John. I think like this is a great time for that because of all of these new platforms and ways for customers to hear your brand instead of just see it.
Like, what if you have an audio element play when you log in, right after you log into some like your company's app or something? It could, maybe they don't have their sound on, and maybe it's just something small, but it's another thing you could use to help your brand be recognizable.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think the other reason why I thought Sonic is because your next one is about Mario.
Yeah, so I had a couple just
I'm going to keep these boxes if I get them.
I know, right? It sounds like they're kind of like a very limited edition, and there's no telling how you ever get them.
And
it's also a little odd because they're not advertising anything totally.
They've done kind of that thing before. Amazon has had some weird box stuff before.
But I think they're cool boxes.
Oh, I mean, I want all of them.
Is this not like a sponsored partnership or something? I would imagine it is.
But it's not technically like, if I remember reading right, it wasn't advertising anything. It was just kind of, unless they're just advertising Nintendo in general.
Yeah, I mean, I could see Nintendo paying to be like a temporary partner where they get their brand and their IP, printed on their boxes, and it's just, I mean, that's a common thing, right? To just have like brand recognition,
One article I was reading though, I totally get it. The one article I was reading was talked about how it would be interesting to get a PlayStation 5 or whatever, Xbox, whatever, from Amazon in one of Nintendo's box. I wonder how those companies would feel about it.
Yeah.
I love this timeline they have.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was like intentional too, I mean, Nintendo knows that these things are getting released, and maybe if it is a paid partnership, maybe it was intentional. And just in time for the holidays to kind of push Nintendo out there.
Yeah, it's fun. I think it's neat.
I like it.
Cool.
And the last fun link I have is another interesting branding idea and element. So KFC is really leaning into the Movember thing this year. I think they've done it before, but at the very beginning of November, to start Movember, they introduced this new logo of Colonel Sanders without any facial hair. And so my guess is by the end of Movember, he'll have it back. But I just think it's pretty interesting. Like, he's this young-faced person, clean-shaven.
I could hardly tell because of the cheek-like indentations. From afar, it kind of looks like he's got a beard, maybe just a shorter one.
Also,
because the
Colonel Sanders has a little tiny body, a little stick figure body.
That's always happening.
Now I can't see. I can't unsee that now.
You never noticed that before?
No.
So good.
That's funny.
It's also a good example of consistent branding where you still know that's KFC, even if it didn't have the mustache. You might be like, something's off, but
I wouldn't have noticed that there was no facial hair.
Yeah.
Like,
it's just a neat, fun thing that they did.
That's that dude with the tiny body.
That is fun.
Yeah.
I wonder how many, if they do that, John, I wonder how many different iterations of that there will be, and then like what kind of logistics are involved. Like that's a lot of like.
Do they have
making
like
sure that every single store is using the right one?
Yeah, I don't know if they'd like do it halfway through. Maybe you just do one halfway, and then at the end you put the old logo back. That would be interesting to see.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Is that it?
I think it is.
Now for one of our classic fabled outros.
we can't talk about the outro.
So this is the outro. This is it. It's the fabled one right now. See y'all later.
I wanted to ask Tori before we go about a controversial thing that you brought up in a previous episode.
Okay.
And then you messaged us about since then.
Yep.
So if I remember correctly, you had a very incorrect take about The Mandalorian. The television show.
I did talk about that, yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, you have gone back and watched more of it since our last conversation. Is that right?
Well, I watched I've watched the 3 episodes of this season.
You did?
Yeah.
And so what did you think, Tori?
So here's the deal. Last time I'd forgotten to bring up one of the other reasons that I had a little bit of a problem with it was the whole thing just feels like one video game fetch quest after another. It's like it follows the same structure in any role-playing game. Like, and again, this isn't necessarily a negative. I just don't really like it in TV shows. So like it's dude does something, somebody says go talk to somebody, and he goes to talk to them, and they're like, well, I guess, but you're gonna have to do something for me first. And this literally happened 3 times already, and it's the 3rd episode of the 2nd season.
That is true. I'll give you that.
You're gonna have to go do something for me first. And so they go travel, and they defeat the boss. So they hit the quest, and then you get a reward from that quest. And in the first season, it's even more because every time he's getting a little bit more of the Beskar, the armor. And so he's literally like getting item drops from the boss. And my favorite thing is the whole thing is just a babysit the VIP mission. Have you ever those missions in video games where you have to that you get the person and then you have to they have to follow you through the level and they keep wandering off or get stuck on the pathfinding? Well, that's Baby Yoda. So and I'd forgotten that was one of the reasons why the first season bothered me is because it was like, dude, if this were in a video game, I would love it. This would work so well. Why didn't they make I want this to be a video game RPG, like an old Knights of the Old Republic, but that would be great. This one. It doesn't sit as well with me when it's in a TV show format. Also, there's a lot I'd forgotten. There's a lot of them. It's like, I guess it's because it's an hour show or however long the shows are, but there's a lot of just like random shots. Like they dwell really long on things like Baby Yoda wanting to eat the stupid eggs.
It's character development.
No, but they keep coming back to it, and then they'll sit on him just looking at it.
Yeah, but
for 30 seconds.
I will say for that.
And it's like, what in the world?
He's a baby.
I don't
get it.
Why are they doing this?
Well, so I will say for that, just to kind of opposite viewpoint, my wife and I will watch it, and we're like, oh no, don't eat the eggs again. Like, I hope he's not actually going to eat the eggs. Or like when they leap. So it's that like anxiety moment. And I think that was okay. That didn't bother me.
5 times too many in that
I haven't watched this yet,
okay,
by the way. So
and
no spoilers, please.
We'll just start watching it.
It's
now I know he eats the eggs.
No, it's Baby Yoda doing Baby Yoda things. It's going to be very obvious.
I will say beginning. I didn't like the second episode really because it was kind of a throwaway. The spider stuff, the second big boss.
That was the other thing I was going to bring up.
I didn't like that episode.
The Mandalorian is one of the few shows that I've literally skipped portions because I was like, this is kind of boring. And I skipped to the end of the spider fight because I was like, I don't really.
We skipped a little bit of the spider stuff just because I hate spiders. And so I was like, I can't watch this right now.
John, have you watched the second episode?
Me?
Yeah.
I haven't watched any of this season.
Oh,
why not?
I'm waiting. We're waiting.
What are you waiting for? Then you have to expect spoilers. If you wait, you have to expect spoilers.
Well, these aren't really spoilers. There's monsters that they fight.
Now I know there's a spider fight and Baby Yoda eats the eggs, so I might as well not even watch it anymore.
Is basically just about these giant spiders in a crash. So they're spoiled the second episode.
To be honest, it sounds like you're describing a Doctor Who episode.
I'm trying to remember what else happened in that. It was a little
That's
weird.
about right, actually.
I do think the character, the Tatooine lady, is really is funny. I think
she's good.
Funny. I laughed out loud at something in one of these episodes. Which,
at something.
Yeah, so I was
There's something.
That was legitimately funny. Because like, there's times where I really, and also the production quality is so high on that show.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen how they do it? Have you watched anything about how they...
the like big CGI thingy? Yeah. It's pretty impressive.
It's pretty interesting.
Well, for a TV show, the CGI quality is like nearly seamless. Like there's been a couple things, like they rode by on the speeders.
Oh yeah, I noticed that too.
But everything else is really good. I laughed at that. Yeah. I was like, that's so fake. But
I like this last episode though. I thought that was good. That added more character, and it brought in characters from
Starbuck in it, so that's cool.
It had what?
From Battlestar Galactica.
Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
Oh.
Starbuck. What's her name?
Does she play a new recurring character?
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
That's right, her. But her character was in the TV show Clone Wars.
Big Bang Theory.
Well,
sorry.
The Clone Wars cartoon
but
TV show. The character she plays in this last episode was in that show.
Okay.
Yeah.
We should call this the Mandalorian Files, I think.
Maybe I should watch it just so that I have something to talk about.
I think you should.
It's a good discussion. I want to go back and watch the first season too, though I did find a lot of the acting in the first season to be frustrating, like with the wrestler girl and stuff. But
I mean, it was half of it was like robot droids.
Yeah, but that's fine. Like one of them was Taiki Wakiti, so that was great. However you pronounce his name, the guy who directed Thor Ragnarok and a bunch of other weird movies.
Yeah, and he directs some of these.
Yeah. Well, this last one was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, right? Which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. That's
cool.
That's the
one who looks like
Ron Howard's daughter.
Jessica Chastain.
Yeah.
She was in Jurassic World and a bunch of other stuff.
Well, she did some last season too.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I remember seeing like a behind the scenes with her and some of the other directors talking about the opportunity to direct a Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
Oh, the Honest trailer for Mandalorian is hilarious. You should watch it.
I'll check it out.
It's really funny.
Can you send the link so I can put that in the show notes too?
Which?
The Honest trailer.
Okay. Oh, I need to post the other stuff. Cool. Well, it's been fun.
It has been fun. Good conversation.
It's been a good time.
I'm going to post these links at the bottom.
And I shared with y'all earlier today, but it's been neat getting some feedback from the Dribbble Roulette people that I told all of them finally that what episode they were in and that they were on the podcast. So yeah, the response so far has been good.
Yeah, that's good. I was a little nervous about that, and it seemed like at least some of them actually listened. Now maybe they skipped to the end, but either way, I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. And hopefully they don't take our feedback too critically.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's been good. We even had a salesperson contact me and try to try to say, hey, I see you're doing a podcast. I'd love to talk to you about something, blah, blah, blah.
And you're like, uh-huh.
Uh-huh, sure.
That's pretty much LinkedIn all the time.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I stumbled across your portfolio and I'd love to chat. I'd love to hear more about your process.
Is a majority of those are people who obviously didn't read my profile based on what they then proceed to tell me. And it's like, I'm not there. I don't live there, for one. I'm not a developer. Like, you can read my profile and see that I'm a designer.
I read a thing that like a lot of these are automated, and if you put an emoji in your name, you can like tell because it will reproduce the emoji. So I had that for a while. I had a little lightning bolt in front of my first name, and it worked. Like sometimes I'd get messages, and it'd be like, "Hey, lightning bolt, John, comma."
That's really good.
That's awesome.
Did I tell you? I don't know if I told Pope this ever, but one time when at Frontline, I got a message from a recruiter saying, "I have a perfect position for you."
I remember.
This senior product designer at a tech company in Malvern that ended up being Frontline Education, which is on my LinkedIn profile, is where I was working, and somehow they still sent me that. It's very funny.
My wife has gotten the same thing for her. So she left her role at her company, and she's basically a contractor. It's not a contractor, but anyways, I hire her personally now instead of the actual role, but they still wanted sort of that same role that she used to have backfilled. So she has been contacted so many times. They're like, you look like you have, the perfect experience for this one, pharmaceutical company in Pennsylvania. She's like, yeah, that's literally my old job.
I do have great experience. Yeah, there's some sketchy recruiting going on out there, I think. But
yep.
Anyway, well, see you guys later.
We'll see y'all later.
It's been fun. See ya.